White. We'll see. I know what you mean, though. Peace, intergalactic, interstellar human families at planet Earth. I am your host, Aseer the Duke of Tears. This is, again, Super Heru Radio. Hello, my co-host, Selena the Empress of 10,000 years or more. Saga Aside, you, your family, the ancestors, all the meteors, and everything else. You know what I mean? I definitely want to say peace, love, and light. From the last time we spoke, mad other stuff has transpired. All to the G of those of us, and by that I don't mean Mason, I mean all to the good by those of us who know that we're here to accomplish great things in a matter of time that to some people seem like forever, but to the learned it's instantaneous. So we definitely want to give shout and praise to, again, the ancestors and all of those prisoners of war who have been mislabeled as slaves and vice versa. Yes, babe. We definitely want to thank you. It's interesting. Interesting. So she also international. So, again, we want to... So with all of that being said, and all of the time that has transpired since the last time we spoke, the headlines were, Dorner and shooting and police fear, which is pretty much the usual digestoid that they give everybody. And since then, we've had different killings and stuff like that. But getting to the Dorner thing, what's interesting is that in watching the series and how it went down, it really mirrored a lot of different movies. And it got me to start to analyze or look into aspects of pop or modern-day culture that was basically put in motion to create a mirrored version of the tragedies and the sonnets written by Francis Bacon, a.k.a. the Shakespeare. So one of those things I was looking at is this whole, love triangle, Chris Brown, Rahana thing. And I'm using these things as euphemisms for other things. But I'm also showing you how when you're a stateless person, you can be used as a portal or a doorway to somebody else's agenda and not really do the knowledge to it till it's too late. So the other day I'm watching this thing and I see we're programmed. It's hard for somebody to program us because then they can seem like we're being programmed. Right. That is just being told what to say. Right. Right. So when you have handlers, the handled are usually the ones with the talent, but they have so much talent that the handlers feel that they need to sequester them. Not very long, no. Sequester them. So what has happened in the case of, like, let's say, Chris Brown Rahana, we can look at that as a mirrored version of Romeo and Juliet, or the Capulets and the Montagues, which were really the stewards and the tutors, you know what I mean? So there's that. Then let's say if you look at something like Othello, we can equate, Tiger Woods, but more effectively somebody like O.J. O.J. is like Othello. Whereas if we look at somebody like the Jay-Z Beyonce thing, this is a version of Macbeth. You know what I mean? Him starting out with his three friends and then, basically killing the other two off and then having to deal with the three witches. But then he's dealing with the three witches, that's Destiny's Child, or Beyonce, the baby, and what's his name, the mother. See, the father's story is King Lear. Matthew Knowles' story is King Lear, whereas Jay-Z's story would be Macbeth, whereas OJ's story would be Othello, whereas Kanye West is Hamlet. They killed the mother, right. Right, he's Hamlet. And then that's what, and the other one is what you call it, Taming of the Shrew was Nazir Khalis. See what I'm saying? How it all kind of mirrors this whole epic that was laid out by the ancestor. But because we've been put off by the Bible, put off by the Sonic, we don't really understand that that was the actual depiction of the decline of the Amalekan Empire into the so-called Franciscan Gallic empires that came after. So once you get to the part of the story that you realize that the people that helped box you out of position was actually your own people, and that they was in control of a lot of shit first, and then it eventually got switched to who's running stuff now, you then get a better perspective as to who and what you're dealing with, basically, which is the envy and jealousy of rival lords who sought to vanquish you, as was written by David McRitchie when he spoke of the ancient and vanquished dukes and duchesses and baronesses of the old American Republic. What? Go back up? No, I don't. There's only one on here. There's only one.
Oh, okay.
Those are just people in the joint.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, as it pertains to situations like, let's say, the Chris Dorner thing, if we look at that as a movie, right, we can equate Man movie to that whole situation. We could equate Bait, right, which was the Jamie Foxx movie that was the precursor to Enemy of the State, right? And we can apply, Shooter, the one with Marcus Wahlberg, where the dude had to pop the cops or whatever and had to bounce. Vantage Point, based on the connections of what was going on with the other shit, as well as Cabin in the Woods. You know what I'm saying? Which was a great movie that deals with ritual sacrifice that people should check out. And when these things play out, what you're watching play out is an actual aspect of a quantum, what they call a quantum fissure, which is a resulting redundant form of energy that has remagnified itself into a polar opposite position of its original position. So this quantum fissure that has popped up basically is what I was saying on the December 21st show. For those people that go back to that, I told you, after December 21st, everything that they're trying to do to specifically do things in the dark are going to come to the light almost instantaneously, because every thought they think travels the planet now 777 million times before it's actually done now. That's because the ethers have opened up so much that the energy that they wish to ratify is moving faster than the air can carry it. So what they tried to do to sync a lot of this shit back up was create this ritual where they had somebody like Rahana, that represents the accepted Queen Harlot of Babylon in their system, to aboard a jet, and that jet's number was 777. So we know that 777 is the number of the Babylon working as well as the Harlot of Babylon in terms of, I think so, and in that aspect. So what began to happen was, while she was up in that air, that's when all of that other shit was going down. Now, she may not know, you understand, that she is fulfilling a function. She may just look at it like, I'm just doing my tour on a plane instead of taking a bus, which is all well and good. But again, these people, stateless Moors, especially undeclared stateless 14th Amendment Missouri Compromise Moors, these are the ones who were used as a portal to accentuate someone else's agenda. They got a new series that's coming on TV where they trying to lionize, they trying to make heroes now out of Carnegie, Mellon, Rockefeller, Rothschild. They doing a new TV show or whatever, series called The Men Who Built America, the robber barons, and gets into all of the stealing and the killing and the murdering and establishment of Federal Reserve and all that. But what you have to remember, folks, let's go back to the beginning. Don't let these people take your common sense and your historical concept and context away from you. Everything that happened after 1928 has been about hiding the fact that you have been and forevermore freed of your burden of white America. And white America has created institutions amongst itself to perpetuate that idea. Chief amongst those institutions is something called the boule that's there to block you at every accord. They are there to make you think that you are everything other than what you are, which is the child of God. They want you to believe that you come from a people that is so great that there is no direct remnant and there's no direct way for you to re-access their greatness. That's the world that they want you in. So that there's no way. So you could be Kemite and all of that, but you could only really be that in the people and the environment that you create for yourself. Because at any time, the United States can come in and show you just who's running shit, you see? And that's a problem. The federal government is a pit bull that ain't been trained right. They've been feeding this thing gunpowder for the past couple of years, and it's basically liable to bite anybody. The dogs like that, you either put them down, right, or you put them through some sort of rehabilitation. Same thing with criminals. This is why Yaqub did not build prison houses for his people. He functioned on a draconian law. But now you got black people that's trying to convince you that you are on the same genetic level as everything and everybody else. So what they telling you, black man, black woman, since you still like those terms, is that you, because they come from a Neanderthal and that Neanderthal was an inhuman and post-human dog or whatever, had sex with animals and apes and all of that, they saying that you come from that. That's what you agreed to when you chose to become separate but equal. That was the result. That your real history was no longer yours. So what I'm saying is you were bamboozled into thinking that somehow becoming equal with somebody that was never from here was going to somehow give you a chance to be better here. When these people, in their instance, had the chance, they took something like Chickasaw Empire and then created something called the Chickasaw County, and then started to offer privileges to people who were in the empire to come live in the county. And then eventually, once they had enough people in the county that was once from the empire, they then seized the empire and then made it a part of the county, and then used those people, and then turned the people whose county and society and nation it was into physical representations of the land, because they could not hold on to the land but through us. Again, using you as a portal, a transmitting utility. So they created a bondsman situation where we fell under the jurisdiction and started calling us American Indians and then niggers. And then niggers became synonymous with chattel, and chattel became synonymous with property and land ownership. They knew they never had jurisdiction over us, but because they had so many Moors, dirty Moors, complicit with them in the dissolution of your government, you have to understand that you had and have a government that is for you, that no government in the world got the right to keep you from, so long as you follow the proper channels and protocols to re-manifest that. Isn't that what they did with Manifest Destiny? Look at what they did with a mandate. That they basically created themselves. They created terrorist organizations to scare you into being in the customary fashion that you was in, which was this chattel property, this once noble Chickasaw that's now turned into a Negro. They didn't forcibly do that to nobody else. To this day, an African from the bush can walk out the bush and go to his consulate with a representative that looked exactly like him, regardless of whether or not the nation is being pimped financially, behind the scenes. It doesn't still erase the fact that they still got a government that looked like them. That alone says a lot. Think about this. If the Maroons were sovereign, meaning they had their own government, their own jurisdiction. They own red flag, right? They own society, almost their own language, agriculture, commodities, exchange, all of that, right? How is it they went from having their own stuff and all of that, right, to then adopting the foreign aspect of Rastafarianism? And I'm not trying to disrespect nobody God, you know what I'm saying, because they worship, some Rastas really worship in that God. But what I am here to say is that they said that of him. He did not say that of himself. He would always speak as himself biblically in the oratory terms. You dig? Like he was supposed to do. But even he was against the convention in 28. The way you know is that what we call Rastafarianism developed out of Leonard Howell as a Algonquin thing. You see? Because if you look at how the Moors back then was wearing their hair, and how the Mau Mau was wearing their hair, and how the mystic Dravidians was wearing their hair, it's the same thing. So dreads predate Rasta, or predate, quote unquote, Jamaica. You understand? But it was qualified and codified in Jamaica based upon the potential ascendancy of the Maroon people as the dominant faction in ruling the government of what we call Jamaica. You understand? So a foreign Moor had to be brought in to sway the people that would allow them to be linked up with an aspect of the prophecy that they may not have been seeing in a certain way. There was a lot of black kings at the time of His Majesty. Think about it. Marcus Garvey was from Jamaica, so when it went down and he got caught up, started writing the emperor was supposed to help him, but at the same time couldn't help him because he still had ties through the Ethiopia thing. Like, think about it. Why would he allow the nation to be named Ethiopia? If you're going to use that, then at least put the A in front of it, right? Why would you name it that when ancestrally, for ages, centuries, it was the Abbasid or Abyssinian? Because he was now dealing in a new arena of what this thing was going to be for the United Nations. And so to prove that allegiance, there was aspects that he couldn't support in terms of the League of Nations, which was really the front for the family of nations, that was now coming out behind this 1928 thing, which then spent and flipped the whole geopolitical stratosphere into situations, but it didn't happen. And so the Moors had to put themselves in a different position, and so their situation had to now be protected, and was now basically boxed them into these protected treaties so long as we was dealing with ourselves as our true person in our aristocratic moiety. That could no longer happen. So certain temples and certain things became functionaries to keep you and I and everything else domestic. And so a theology was kind of manifested, or that came out of the Belgian Conference, called the liberation theology, that would basically derive out of a forced pogrom system called colonization, or the colony system, of which produced the forced labor of black POWs, as well as the forced migration of different nations into different African territories, which then exacerbated the ancient clan feuds and stuff like that had started after the dissolution of the empire, which basically started with the intrusion of those expelled Grenadian Moors into the Songhai Empire that had ties to us and the Axumites. So when we talk about Ghana, Mali, these are all aspects of the Moorish Empire. You understand what I'm saying? It's just we have been looking at it from a somewhat jaded perspective, as meaning that just because I'm saying I'm a Moor, I'm like that with everybody else. And just like everything, it's not like that. You know, when one Christian does something bad, everybody don't come out and start bashing Christianity. I mean, some people do, but that don't happen. So just because there's a couple of Moors or 30 Moors that's out here doing crazy shit, that don't mean that the prophet is that. And what is happening now is not truth being revealed. It's more about post-communist conjecture and slander based upon people's understanding or misunderstanding of the evidence at hand. Because when you put yourself on a path to find something as a researcher, that's what you're going to find. You know what I'm saying? Like, once you become aware of something, you start to see it everywhere. So if you're only looking for something as a means to verify your opinion or your point and not truth, then you're going to find things to do that. Because you make your reality as you go along. So like I said, everything I'm saying right now is the truth, as far as I have done the knowledge and research and whatever, right? But there's still some people that don't like it that simple, so they're going to try to find fault and nitpick and break it down and find out what's not true about it, as opposed to looking at what I'm saying as a whole. And what I'm saying as a whole is that our people, the people on the planet Earth right now, are coming into the great understanding that they are not what they have been bred to believe they are. And thus, it has created a vacuum, or like I said, quantum fissure, which then leaks out what's called almost like hemorrhages, little hemorrhages, time-sphere hemorrhages that result into quantum redundancy. Therefore, the need for the power structure to create ritualistic symbolism to match up with these redundancies is more important now, because they need more of that so-called psionic energy to perpetuate their physical needs, because everything that happens physically has to start in a non-physical place. Yet, the invasion has already started with this thing they shot down over the Urals of Russia. What are in the Urals of Russia? The Caucasus, right? Where was the birthplace or the first place that they was run into and locked up? The Caucasus. Most of the original mystic Turk or so-called Jewish tribes that exist were now in a perspective where they could not fully stop the onslaught due to the amount of amalgamation that was going on. So a lot of Moors just bit the bullet and joined up, got themselves a white girl, and chose to just be Moors in secret. And this is where the Shriners came in. So the ancient order of the nobles of the mystic shrine, you see, that was started with black people first. Way before the white boy do it. Got it? So again, what do they really, or what have they really created that's of their own that didn't start or come out of the societies Americanos Estados? Nothing. And this is not to bash somebody's culture or Peregrines Albinus Gallic descendants, meaning the people who call themselves white today. This is to clarify the situation that their elders and their people are not telling them in secret. There's a reason why they feel so crazy and things that have happened to them and coming up, and why they can have so much privilege and feel like they don't deserve it. These things come from somewhere. It's not a delusion. The delusions come from the psychic playback that comes back after the trauma subsides. And you're dealing with a people who force themselves into a perpetual traumatic state by thrusting themselves on the brink or the edge of what they call life. Yet, because they are still such an infant race, they have to go through the stages of realizing that the material aspect of themselves is not really what's there. This is the culture perfection, because the system of the regrafting back into the original man is already started. It's just, but the problem is that we are looking at it from the consciousness level. So we know that the conscious level of our people is such that it's not on the omniscient level universally yet. So those of us that are co-opted into some sort of servitude or marriage or relationship with those people specifically of the Eurozoid or Perigenes, Albanese, Gallic races, people who call themselves white people, we know that there is some sort of method to their madness. And this is not to say that every Caucasian person is down with it, but it is to say that in this country specifically, as well as in places like the continent of Africa, the preponderance of destruction at the hands of living amongst them has not proven beneficial to us, because they are still acting as bondsmen to ourselves, to ourselves culturally. Meaning that once we shake them off, there's nowhere for them to go. Understand? Just like the story of Yaqub, in which he put them on the boats, and they basically sailed around the whole continent of Africa. And during certain points, people got so disgusted about what was going on the joint, they started jumping off ship. So what that also means is that this is the first aspect of barbarism on the high seas in the form of this experiment that this man was carrying out on his way to the places. So when you take those places, the Yaqub breeding ports, and you superimpose the transatlantic slave trade over those ports, and you superimpose the triangle trade, you superimpose the Middle Passage ports, as well as the so-called transatlantic slave trade ports, as well as the so-called triangle ports, and they all sink on top of each other. So what does that mean? That means this thing actually happened, and that these things that we see as the great Holocaust, or the great so-called African Holocaust, or the great slavery Holocaust of humanity, these were all aspects of the Yaqub breeding experiment and those people who were either for and against it. This Yaqubian experiment also brings in the extraterrestrial aspect in terms of the ancestry of this one they call Yaqub, based upon the lessons and stuff that was written by Fard, as well as the African story of Yorubu, who was not fully born and chose to come out early, and in that did not have the full protection of the goddess on him, because it chose to mate with its placenta and birth itself out of its mother and itself, but in that came out prematurely, therefore had to subsist on the society around it and use things like chips and lies to be able to control and rule in the place of the full-born brother who was born after. See? So this creates a different paradigm now when we look at this as a real event or a real aspect of our history that's almost so old and mythic it is only passed down orally. This because it not only holds the secret of the race that exists, but the fact that we were the predominant original. So those that came out of us based upon the fact that this being that did this had a self-hatred complex, based upon the fact it could not go back to a place of people that looked like itself. Meaning that the term Yaqub, which means supplanter or usurper, was a manifestation of the dissatisfaction that was going on around the time that these events took place. So in the allegorical history, when we look at it, we're looking at the perspective of him being a product of two inner extraterrestrial races. So now when you start talking about stuff like this, a lot of black people turn off, as well as a lot of mainstream people turn off, because this is aspects of stuff that they want to be proven to them physically. Yet, a lot of people don't understand the difference between what is physical and non-physical, because they are coming from a human perspective. But we as Asiatics are not here to always explain our perceptions of historical events to other people or justify why we should look at them the way we do. So it said that he came from one side of the family was of people called the Shayuk, or the Shuk, or the Shuk, right? So this, in my understanding, is the pre-term, or where the term Sheik comes from, right? So the Shayuk, or the Shuk, or the Sheik, or the Sheik, right, existed in the interterrestrial earth because they came from a higher vibrational frequency. And in the inner earth, you could downgrade into a physical form and still maintain the non-physical physical aspect due to the ultraviolet sun that sits at the center. So because the oxygen rate is higher than 200 feet, people grow very tall and things like that. So of that, the two so-called main Asiatic races that was there was the Shayuk and the Yasini. The Yasini is the precursor to the original people we will call the Esseni, where we also get the term essence from. They allegedly were more cone-shaped heads, like that you see in El Hermano, and some babies most Asiatic babies born today are born with elongated heads, but because they use forceps, and most women get C-sections and stuff now, they don't get to let the head come out elongated and then reduce in the form position naturally. They try to sculpt it off the top. Because, again, that's a sign of the Asiatic or alien so-called trait. Just as the dark-skinned babies that come out very light and then eventually darken up. That's an aspect of the Yakub trait, where because the trait and the method that he was doing was so diabolical, that nature in its wonder and splendor started to allow the babies to come out light at first, just so they could live, and then melanate as they stayed out. You know what I mean? And this has been carried down on to us today. So in the process of this, the other race, the Asani, they came from a higher dimension, but in the process, they were the type that in their sphere, they would, before they downgraded in physical form, graft out the negative aspect of themselves and allow it to coalesce into a being. So that way it would live outside and they wouldn't have to deal with the negativity or whatever. So in the process, the third race that was created was this sludge-type troll-like that became Neanderthal-type people that, I forget what they'll call. Let's call them the fluorods, like Dr. Yo called them. And in the process of that, they eventually downgraded or upgraded into trolls and all of them monsters that we talk about in Mythic, period. So they eventually attacked the Shayuk. Shayuk fought back. They tell the Asani, yo, get your devils in line. They get the devils in line. They still beef between the Asani, the Shuk, the Shayuk to be like, okay, well, let's switch babies, which is the Moorish custom. And they both married each other's babies. So one of the brother that was snubbed from the king, he moved up top, meaning that he stayed on the surface world with the original Asiatics and fronted himself off as like a priest or whatever. His brother was now king. So based upon the Asani woman now living amongst the Shayuk people, she didn't like that. So she would then bounce and have this tryst outside in the surface world and eventually wound up getting pregnant and having this big-head Shayuk baby, which was Yakub, but could not take the baby down because then they would know that she was now breaking the code, cheating on her husband, basically. And so once it got found out, process of fighting, he winds up getting killed. And then his mother, Lucia, winds up killing herself, and then he has to wind up living with his uncle. So you see the traumatic aspect that brought about this situation. So all he's seeing is dark-skinned people killing his family. You know what I'm saying? So this is becoming a problem. And so as he grows up, as you know the rest of the story, he plays a two-piece of steel, realizes he can break people. So what he wanted to do is get to the original gene of the albionic gene, right, was stripped away from the melanin on the dermis and the epidermis and the internals, to allow that to be manifested, because that was the aspect of his Yasani heritage, his mother's heritage, that he then could actualize and then use as a means to break all the dark-skinned races and have revenge upon everybody and all of us. And he got people to be down with him to do that. So it shows you how great paradise was and how niggas just messed it up because they just didn't like what was going on. Again, so this is the breeding of the self-hatred amongst the original people, because now we are now so physical and start to interbreed with the people who are basically traditional humans that was just here doing their own thing. That's basically us. But those of us that were descended from that system came from that, and out of then that great cataclysm that resulted in all the wars, these people get rounded up and moved about and locked away. And every so often here, somebody comes and tries to civilize them and work it out or whatever, usually somebody from the Hebraic line. Whereas by the time the Turk line came, you see what I'm saying, we're dealing with people who, some of them have escaped and interbred with these people, and so they become darker and more human. And then the so-called human or Asiatic that melt with them, mated with them, then becomes more physical and less Asiatic, less human. You see? It's a give and take ebb and flow system of genetic denationalization that takes place over a corresponding year of 6,000-year cycles. That has now come to the last of the 6,000-year cycles that we just passed on December 21st, which is why nothing is working out for them openly anymore. So as the invasion has started, they're trying to shoot it before it gets down here. So in the process of this so-called meteor, right, we actually see remnants of life in it. All you got to do is look at the movie Invasion and see in that movie that the life was actually a genetic life form, bioorganic life form that would take over a host. And the story now today is everybody running to go try to get a piece of it because they're trying to get an aspect of this life form. That's really a manifestation of the upgrade of all of us. As above, so below, heaven to earth. But because Russia is basically now taking the back seat or the parallel seat to China and Iran, they are forming a new aspect of what is the old Amarakan Empire against the corrupt United States Empire that's still imposing its will upon the societies, Americanos Estados, which is the perpetual state of Morocco or the perpetual state of the Moors. But because the Moors have been detracted and put in a domestic capacity based upon their affiliations and their insistence upon affiliations with organizations that lock them down to a domestic capacity and keeps them wrapped up in bullshit like traffic tickets and bench warrants and things like that. They don't establish themselves in an international capacity that allows and affords them the protections that the federal government is supposed to give them. That's why the state government be hating. The state government can't necessarily recognize you because essentially the state government is sitting in your place. So all the state government can do is step aside and let you do your thing. And if they don't, that's when you empower the federal government to go in there and mandate what's going on. Federal government is either working for you or against you. So when you hear these black people, these uppity bourgeoisie black people who have studied and done all of this study and professional students and have BAs in African American science, what are they talking to you about? What does that mean? They want you to believe that Moorish history, Moorish science is like an aspect of black history, like like studying like a religion aspect of it, like Yoruba, or elective. Like you study the political systems of Zimbabwe, write a thesis on that, and then you have a BA in African American Studies, International African American Studies. That has nothing to do with what Zimbabwe is. You understand? Therefore, all academies and universities are created for people of color. It is 2013, and black people are still receiving awards from an organization dedicated to upstanding people of color, meaning stateless people. And these are black people who know better. They all know better. They're selling you IDs and packages, and none of that shit works because you don't have to do any of that to really get on. You just got to follow the tenets of the trust that was set up for you, but you don't know. You don't know. And everybody's sworn to keep it secret from you. Because to really get into it would then to really shake aspects of national security in a positive way. So there's no ossification. There's no way that anybody could say that, who's been listening to this show, can say that I'm talking about what anybody else is talking about, because I'm not talking about what nobody else is talking about. So much so that I don't even have to, because the people tell me. And because I verify and give books and facts and post stuff on Facebook or whatever, everything that we've ever posted on Facebook has to be something of merit or value, just because it's also a public record. It's a public record. It can be used the same way you use a stenographer. So, yeah, it's a backward search engine for CIA that co-opted it from Zuckerberg, who's a Rothschild anyway. But it doesn't matter. It's what you apply it to. And so long as you're not putting your situation around people or whatever situation you don't need to be in, you're good. Because honor is what's mattering now. Integrity. Knowing that if I'm not using this identification, why would I give it to somebody? Why would I give something to somebody else? Why would I give this person this form of paperwork or whatever if I wouldn't use it myself? Do unto others. Love your brother as you love yourself. Love thy neighbor. What happened to that? No, we in the fiscal culture. So, and a lot of niggas realize that and want to get out. Look at somebody like Rick Ross, and I use these people as archetypes. I'm using them as portals, the same way the white man uses them to talk to you. I'm using them as examples of a certain sphere of success that most people see as successful. Yet it's a gilded cage. It's a golden choker. Because with somebody like him, you know, already pissed off the GBs, which is a form of the gods and earths. Really. With the 6-point star, like if you're gonna rock the 6-point star, you gotta be a Moor. You gotta know that's you gotta understand what the whole hex alpha and all that is. So you rocking a 6-pointed star, nigga, and you're gonna be in a car with a chick with the last name L spelled the right way. Oh, nigga, you trying to jump fence. Now we got the right to out you. You understand what's going on? Then you already patterned yourself after Biggie. So you already putting yourself in the mythos to go out the same way. You worship in death. They got you making records about coffins, 100 coffins, and all of that. They got you practicing moral science through the asshole, literally through the anus end. Because that's all Satanism really is. It's a bastardized version of moral science, perverted with Catholicism, all to throw you off of the fact the same pentagram that's on your Moorish flag is the same one they use, just inverted. But if you look at the picture of the prophet sitting in the office with Pearl, above his head was the American flag and the Moorish flag inverted. So does that mean that he was a Satanist? No. But if Satan represents Capricorn and he was born in January, I mean, come on, man. You do the math. You see what's going on. That's Saturn. We're in a period now. We're in a period now, speaking of that, where the sun joins Mercury, you know what I mean? Where it's starting its own retrograde cycle. Again, Mars, Chiron, Neptune, all in Pisces, right? A sign that's strongly associated with spirituality, creativity, and a lot of things that lead to nonstop inspiration. You know what I mean? Wow. You see? We linking up. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. This is where they are at. Crazy. It's crazy. So, the sun joins Mercury, right? So that's Mars, Chiron, Neptune, Pisces, right? These are all heavy aspected joints of understanding. Mars, which is war, Chiron, the wounded warrior, Neptune, not seeing things necessarily clearly, Pisces, washing things away and making things deeper, you know? So when a group of planets like this occupies a single sign, you got to do the knowledge, you know what I mean? This is very heavy, you know, because all of this, excuse me, is going on as the sun is entering Pisces. The Aquarius aspect that has now come out is now going to be followed up with this heavy energy as we move closer now to New Year, which is 21st, 22nd, right? So all of the mystical aspects of the ethereal Pisces is the things that's coming out in mutable signs like Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, you know. So there's a freedom that's coming with this retrograde because it's retrograde in terms of corrections is great. Water signs need to, pay attention to not really get too caught up, swept away and stuff that has nothing to do with them at this period as well. You know what I mean? Whereas the Neptunian fog, again, is starting to lift, like the fog that rises off the mist of the water in the early dawn, especially in places like creeks and stuff like that. Those are ancestors and spirits that are transcending in the evaporated form of the oxygen, which then purifies them and everybody else. So because the Saturn stations are retrograde, this is the coming of the 144,000. Because the buildup of the 12th cycle period of the Saturn retrograde can be listed or is listed as 144,000 in books like Saturn, A New Look at the Old Devil, and the only astrology book you ever need by Woolfolk. So, them wanting to get a black pope in there named Turkson, who come from the Ghanaian Empire, which is the Benin Empire, which is the old Moorish Empire. You know what I'm saying? People lived in castles and shit. We're in a position. We're sitting in a position like a king. We're sitting in a position to be able to accentuate a reality for ourselves that consists with us thinking in a fully international level. But to do that, you got to leave all the nigger shit. The problem is that the nigger stuff is what's killing everybody. There's no, even the sanctioned Moorish institutions that may exist out there of higher learning have not coalesced enough people together that can crescendo to the point that everybody's on it. Because everybody got a piece, but nobody want to give their piece to the whole. And that's because of the distrust amongst the Moors and why contracts and things had to start to be created in the first place. No, but you at least said, the one thing I'll be surprised is when I see a Moor do right. You know what I'm saying? And that's because it got so dirty and so about power based upon what we was truly inheriting that he did the only thing he could do. Return himself and leave it all as a vast estate trust for those of the learned that could really understand. But we are wrapped up in tribal infighting. National Grand Secretary emailed me a Moorish dossier on what they call sovereign citizens, and one of the things in there was the Moorish nation. So it said Moorish nation, sovereign citizens, this and that. But all it had was Moorish people in the shit. All of that was being funneled through channels. All that information was provided by people, again, who had got caught up in doing bullshit and getting caught up in creating fake notes and all this other types of shit to, again, give us the bad name that's supposed to be doing this thing for real. You understand? Because people, again, they create, we are a true isonomy, which can't even be described. Why people erase that from your lexicon? You don't even know what that is. So in the process of that, they have created a system was created to keep us perpetually ignorant by accepting nomenclatures that had nothing to do with our station, but had always had a lower station in their opinion. Therefore, Saturn started to work against us. Saturn rules Capricorn. Capricorn was, again, the prophet sign, and therefore was the sign of the Moorish Science Temple, of one of the two initiators of the Moorish Science Temple. Therefore, that's a heavy influence on our position. Saturn also, and Capricorn also rule the bones. That's the structure. That's the foundation. Therefore, when the Templars created Baphomet to shield the fact that they were trying to worship and go back to the ways of Muhammad, they had to create all these elaborate rituals and all that shit to throw these devils and all these people off for the fact that they was trying to come back home, believe it or not. But because most of them was married to white girls and having harems and sex with white men and things like that, all in need to raise them up and bring them and make them more notable and heavier and better fighters and all of that, these are the people who created the people who become the Mamluks that Napoleon would deal with in the pillaging of the tombs in Kemet. The Kemet ain't Egypt. What if actual Egypt, the actual place they call Egypt, was here? People need to check out the Negus, and his Jive Turkey work. Go to jiveturkey.com, check out the Negus. And you see what he dropping on people on that. And what Horace Butler talking about. And when rocks cry out. Big up to the Queen Yafa Bay. She was saying how the Native Americans are trying to copyright or something. It don't matter. You can do that. It don't matter. You can't stop me from using it. You don't got enough people that's sober enough in your reservation to come in to us with any bullshit. As messed up as we are. At least we still civilly literate. At least we still trying to put in work. Even the niggas, even the dirty Moors, they at least got to do some sort of sit-down study, write, cut and paste, whatever they doing. They still applying something to something. They still not speculative. These Native Americans is straight speculative. They dancers. They're entertainers. They're a band. It's like a record label. They call themselves that, tribal bands. But they're not the nation. You can't have the Cherokee Nation and not have us in it. If you got a Cherokee Nation with us not in it, that ain't no Cherokee Nation. Because the blood that you saying it got to be pure, meaning I got to have white man blood in me. Because they are Caucasian or white or Eurozoid people. Look at their actions. Only a white man would think about trying to listen to our shows and then want to copyright some shit to block us from getting in. You trying to stop us again. But I ain't got to deal with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Because I know in the oldest dictionary it said in America, Indian, in the late 17th, 18th, 19th century mean nigger. So even if they call them niggas, they still got to qualify them as red niggas, meaning that they niggas that came after the niggas. So you ain't the nigga. Only we are the nagars. Only we can go all over the world and fully reestablish these international relationships, given the right perspective. But we can't do it in the state we're doing it now with these people. Therefore, the redistribution of the original people, or the forced migration, diaspora, if you will, that was a process that came through these things that we call the slave trade and the housing. The slave trade initially being that of the Caucasoid mass production and then moving all over the planet, and then those people that started to get in off of that. But before all of that, being the whole Yakub situation that eventually led to the destruction of these continents and the cleaving of the continents into what they are now. And due to the Uganda region or the Kenyan, Congo, Ethiopian region of the planet and the opening into the inner world where the original Shayuk would come out and commune with their peoples, whatever, that's where it went down, which is why CIA went up in there and had to do the things they did, which is why Leopold went up in there and did the things they did. You have to understand, like I said, everything after 28 was about hiding and concealing the fact that the United States was no longer in control of the hemisphere of North America. And that time was given to them to December 21st to fully, formally re-establish themselves as something else. But because the people were forcefully put under the trick bag through people like Hoover, these dirty Moors, who were able to then actually spy on Moors and work out the structure on them, used a benign breath contact to essentially set up the paradigm system that still exists to this day. The Protestant Catholic white people at the top, the Protestant white so-called Jewish people is in the middle, the Boule slave black people is at the bottom, and everybody else. But the Moor told me, the United States will never have jurisdiction over Chinese citizens, Chinese nationals. That's why you don't see no Chinese nationals in court nowhere, really, like that. They got their own thing. They got their own world within your system. And you and I could have the same thing. Because that's what these things, we made way for that here. Your forefathers and foremothers and mine. But Moors today don't understand the path of lineage. And so a great elder sister to me, still with me the other day, and was telling me, yo, the nationality or whatever is passed through the mother. And I was like, yeah, I could see that, but, you know what I mean, then why is so the father the one taking out the house and all of that? She was like, the nobility passed through the father, in the form of the taking of the name. So the more I was building with today was building and was saying that it's the mother of your it's the mother of your mother's sister, I believe he said, or her husband, her uncle, which is your uncle, that you are supposed to get the wisdom, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding and pattern the life after. That's why most people never wanted you to be around your uncle. 97% of the households in the United States. Every one of them families has a family member that nobody talks to. That family member is usually the more of the family, meaning the black sheep. And this has become the substance by which they have been able to conceal your birthright inheritance from you, and I, and us, and we, and they, and the world. And why we have been forced to be buck dancers and lampooned throughout the world to not be taken seriously as formidable so-called rulers. Even the Africans and the kings and stuff they're doing, they don't have enough to fully repel the invasion of those people who come from their own country, who are willing to sell themselves out to people for money to destabilize the people in their own country, and then create a culture where they rape and kill and torture their own people on behalf of these people so long as they get money. And then once they get to a point where they've done so much of that, the person who's giving them the money turns tail on them, leaves them isolated, creates sanctions, and then goes, kills them, takes over the country, and then turns it into a corporation. This is the same tactic that has been going on since the establishment and the folding of the former British East India Company. But what you have to remember are that the British Moors are the only power. What gave the British Moors the secondary powership in Europa under the Germans was that they were still loyal to the old Moorish Empire, even though after the defeat of the Spanish Armada, they absorbed aspects of it and only supplied the Moroccans with poor ships and stuff like that to keep the Moroccans in a subordinate position now, as they used the puppet Moorish monarchy of so-called Britain, which at the time was German, which is why you got Germans in there now. So the Germans, like I said, each one of these so-called European races or European cultures represent a different aspect of dayship that came out of the Mamluk system enforced by the Grand Orient days of Gaul, meaning the Templars, who they pay honor them, and the Moors of what we call Spain, the Moriscos, who were the first turncoats against the Franciscan, quote-unquote, Moors, who were the Moriscos. So you had the Holy Roman Emperors, the Germans, and the Austrians, and the Prussians, and the Hungarians. And then you had the Grand Orient Moors of Gaul, Franciscan Moors of Gaul, and then you had the Morisco, the Medici families from Spain and Aragon and Castile and all of that. And all of them were the ones who were coming in because they had been the products of us to go in and make sure that Moorish would be switched for Spanish and started to dilute what the Moorish Empire would be. And then worked in secret and in tandem with other nations who were just as black or whatever as us in complexion, but due to our level of circumstance and everything, they felt that the only way the world could move forward would be the destabilization of our nation. And out of that, a new nation or new nations would be born that would inherit the legacy that we, in a sense, stopped ourselves from getting or allowed ourselves to give up so that way everybody else in the world could come up. And it could be a pseudo-equal society of brotherhood, fraternity, and liberty. And so the secret of who you are as a nation, as a people, was done. This is a Holocaust. This is what makes this history different than black history, even though this thing is an aspect of black history. Just like a Moor can be an African, but an African can never be a Moor. A Moor can be a Mason, but a Mason can never be a full Moor. You put one pants leg on before the other. You don't jump into your pants. So that means that there's an order that comes out of the chaos that manifests into what you inherently are. And that is something that is so beautiful that it had to be negated and fetishized and put into the form of sexual congress. And so because of what I said about the woman is the one that has to resurrect herself. The story, remember, don't go in reverse. It's not Osiris resurrecting the Isis to bring her back. That the only person in history that depicted himself doing or was depicted doing something like that, again, is Noble Jew Ali, when you see him holding the woman now, pulling her out of the shallow grave. Because she is the one who was given the doctrine and accepted it and went from a queenship to a mistress concubineship and then into that to whoredom. So they, Orthodox, quote-unquote, Sunna Muslims, don't want it. Red beard Muslims, they don't want to acknowledge you as real Muslim because you don't do all of the ritual. But the fact that they're doing the ritual makes them Muslims and not Muslims. To be a Muslim or Mohammedan, you got to be a Moor. Every time you say it, you're empowered. And that's why they want it lampooned. And that's why they want you to start calling yourself other stuff. And that's why they want you to start hating on the prophet and saying that he's like Elijah Muhammad. But isn't it a coincidence that both Elijah Muhammad and then all of a sudden our prophet are being, put in the same context as being somehow pedophiles? But then you speak to the women today, they said that they wasn't even a part of none of that shit. It wasn't until R. Kelly started doing the closet shit that all that shit about him in the papers went away. All that shit went away, man. And where'd that take place? Chicago. So in this attempted assassination, in the whole Cabin in the Woods drama with the Black Titan coming out of the earth and them having to burn the cabin and get away, he's forming this big black man, of which they'll probably get LL Cool J to play him in the movie, which then lets you really know that the fix is in. Really lets you know the fix is in when they do that, which is why they had him on the Grammys on the same night. And again, this don't mean that these dudes know that that's what it is. They just get the call to be there, and they show up and say the lines and do what they got to do and then keep it moving, like what they're supposed to do. But because they're stateless people, 14th Amendment citizens, shadows, they don't have no rights. Yeah, you got $100 million, but IRS could come and take that if they want. And they don't even exist. They're not even a part of the government. But they can get the government to do shit. Why? Because the IRS had to be set up to seize all the United States assets as in REM to pay down the national debt, the debt to the nationals of the Republic of the United States of America and General Congress Assembly and a family of nations, Iroquois Confederacy, Articles of Confederation, Article of Association, Original Treaty, Marrakesh, 1786, and the other treaties that people in the class we build on know about, that dudes can't mess with because based on their so-called affiliations, they can't move in certain directions fully. And if they do, they got to be guarded based upon what it is they've already put out there in the world to be negative. And a false documentation to our people, giving people shit that don't really work, or that they can't go and see the usefulness of themselves to receive and afford the protection that they're supposed to have, not because they're trying to be down with the white man or get the white man to fight power. There's none of that. If you got an attack dog, and that attack dog can attack you or somebody else, you're going to want that dog to attack somebody else, not you. So if the attack dog is the federal government and it is being used by whoever is paying for it or knows how to use it, then you would be a fool in this war not to do so. But in this war, we are foreign, neutral, non-enemy combatants in amity. That's what makes us different than other organizations that came prior, because they were not seen as, they were fell under the jurisdiction of American citizens and could not tie themselves to the republic that existed beforehand. That's the only reason why you can exert what you can exert now and then not do nothing. They may go through the play with you, the theater, but so long as you don't have nothing open and you ain't body nobody, but even if you would get so right that you could do that and they still not do nothing. But you got to be in such a place of honor and fortitude that you operate in a constant guise of the empire. Everything you do is for the betterment of the empire, even when it's for yourself. Even when you just chilling, not even think about nothing, you think about ways to make the empire better. That is the Morris way. Those of us that's on this consciousness shit have been doing and lived this. So how they going to tell you that you don't have the right to not be down with them? That's what you're telling me. You're telling me that because I'm declaring this, that I somehow owe you something. But I didn't ask you for nothing. You created all of this birth certificate and all that shit by yourself. So here go the real irony. In my book, that came out way before the movie Lincoln, I wrote about this movie called Lincoln in it in a little while. They created a system where in the movie he was basically working furiously to get the 13th Amendment passed. Once the 13th Amendment passed, that's when they had to out him, because that was the way for us to get back into the state that we was in prior to the war. But to do that, you got to be able to come to grips with what the true amendment was. So after they popped them, they flipped in a new amendment, and then that was never ratified. So they just ratified it because some white woman went and watched the movie Lincoln and looked up. Watched it in the movie, linked up what happened, I guess took them to court or whatever, and they realized they never did it, and so now they ratified it. So is this a case of life imitating art imitating life, all of the above? This is an example of what I'm talking about in terms of the quantum fissure. I had no idea that they was going to do this when I was writing this book all those years ago. The book come out, Django come out, before all that come out, the conspirator come out, meaning the end of the story, how they try to make the woman the patsy for it, because they had to make it a Masonic ritual about sacrificing the mother. But Randolph is always left out of the story. See what I'm saying? So during this time and period, this is why they had to go to such a great length as to go into the tombs and all of that, because they was trying to find a way to alter what the prophet had already put down in that circumstance. That's why you don't really hear these Moors really talk about it like that. And now trying to fictionalize it and turn it into something else. When really it was such a monumental event that changed the course of human history. And we are the inheritors of that. And so what I found interesting in watching this whole dossier about all these different Moorish groups and all of the wild, crazy shit they was doing to get jammed up and locked up and incarcerated and isolated by the man, I noticed that there was no mention of the so-called Moorish Orthodox Church. which again was these so-called Caucasian Moors who have international passports and all this other type of stuff that have meetings in Congress based upon them descending allegedly from the wandering bishops, right? This is the alleged adepts that helped create that. Now you got to understand, out of the Moorish Orthodox Church came Timothy Leary and Alice Coltrane and all types of people. It's the ashram now, I think. This is where Moon and these people get in. But if you want to get the real science of how the white man was looking at the Moorish perspective, that's when you got to read the Moon book. Because in his thing, in his degree, he can let that degree loose, whereas these other people who've been writing about Moorish science stuff, they can't really get into that because they're under the penalty. Because they part of Masonic orders, or they started doing shit the wrong way, and once they figured out shit that they were doing was wrong, they kept doing the wrong shit. And that created a negative karmic cycle around them, of which they could only subsist on people who could give them money to do the opposite of what they said. So this thing that then gets passed around through the country or whatever gets put in. But then the sign that says sovereign citizens, there's no mention of them really. These are the so-called Caucasian militiarists that eventually phased out and became now known as what we know as the Tea Party. That's the sanctioned white descent, who claim descent from the Sons of Liberty directly and the Daughters of the American Revolution, who were the original harlots of Babylon that slept with the Moorish men of the Navy to create or help create these races that eventually became the Patagonian races that we now know today that live in the jungles of the Yucatan and places like that. So, you'll see images whenever there's a black man and a white man on TV. The black man is always the one to die. He's always the one who gives his life for the white man or the white woman or the white baby, or he's always bald-headed, or he's either gay or he's a police officer. The only way he can really have powers is he's a police officer, or if he was in jail, he was a drug dealer or a rapper or somebody who came from an existence of some sort of poverty and descended from some sort of slave and underclass situation. Or he's the exact opposite, where he does not have any affiliation with black people and is the exact extreme. Because that's the jaded perspective that was created through the Harlem Renaissance. Through people, the juxtaposition of W.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey. Amor, close the door, please. Oh, okay. Close your door. And that creates the system or schism that led to our acceptance of this erroneous position. And then once the colored thing started to be used haphazardly, people started getting money for that. And so they began to keep that part of their family secret, started to show up at lodges and get funny rituals they needed to do at home and ways that they had to treat their wives and stuff, and didn't know where the stuff was coming from. But it was coming from the backwoods teachings of the Scottish Rite that was given to them eventually, or down the line, from Albert Pike, who gave it to Thornton Jackson, who then gave it to everybody else. So just as the Moor is the bailiff of 100, he is also the sovereign grand commander in any order. Therefore, when you in your true capacity, they're supposed to give up their seat, or they're supposed to render you some sort of financial or aid in form of shelter, or house, the Moor. Shelter or house or king or zakat, which is charity or dowry, as you are the maker. You know what I'm saying? So the perpetual state of the Moor does not depend upon his religious or her religious affiliation. whatever you want to believe and act as your God, you can do that. It's just that you know that the great God, Allah, is the ultimate spirit, and that's what defines you as a manifestation of that archetype. Therefore, the divine archetype of an arm, leg, arm, head has transformed down through the triple stage darkness, through the different spectrums of light, into the access way of what we perceive reality to be. But being spiritual, physical, non-physical beings, we can travel back to that point of bliss at any point based upon our aspect of visualization. And the more honorable and respectful we are in our deeds, the more we are able to access this part of the pineal gland that is only activated when you exist in that space. You got to remember, the pineal gland used to be the size of a grapefruit. So imagine how big your skull was. You were domesticated down into this form as the reality itself shrunk around you, because there was a form before there's a pre-form before the form. So as the semen goes into the egg and it becomes what it's going to grow into a being, the form of what that being is already laid out in the circumference of the radius, right, in form of movement that it takes for these two chemicals to correspond. Okay. And then that becomes what we call matter. But that matter has an antimatter construct that is matter in a non-physical form, which is an evidence of a soul and something that pre-existed before the organism existed. This is why a theocratic aristocracy is something that cannot be overturned. That's why they was able to give this dude immunity, and now they want to try to keep him. But the next one is lined up. They got to go with somebody named Peter at the end, and because they know it is, they want to settle it. So based on his perspective to get amnesty, he can operate in a position of quasi-popeship while they get ready to position the black pope. To make the two twin towers two black men. Both African, right? One thinks he's African-American, and really he's American-American, meaning the guy that they sitting in the U.S. office now. I mean, the fact that they had a drone flyover at the inauguration shows you the course that this person has set in. This person has allowed now for child rebel soldiers to be reinstated in Yemen and Uganda, meaning the forced labor and arming of children to kill other children armies has been green-lighted. You understand? The murder rate in the name of an oligarchy that he doesn't even really understand, but is the agent of, has become the source of all dread in the world, to be the exact opposite of what our society was and is. So Our Time in the Sun concluded in 1774. Our Time in the Moon, meaning Time of Islam, began in 1928. And every war they've been fighting have been wars of subjugation of nations that were attached to the Almoravian Empire. That was a subordinate aspect of the Republic of Moors that existed here, and housed and shrined in all of the buildings that you see in Washington. and then all the state capitals. Virginia is all white now, but the old money in Virginia is Moorish, because in 1667, militias were enacted to keep the white people in line, because in Virginia, the tobacco thing was a little different than the cotton thing, and the Moors that they were importing from Africa as prisoners of war, when those Moors were bringing these Moors over, they did not make as much money off of them based upon their methods of working with them than they could make off of them in the sugar situation down in the Caribbean. So they decided to just import white slaves and come and do the work. And so they started to kidnap white people all up and down the East Coast, as well as buy them off of one-eyed Charlies, meaning Barbary pirates that was coming in, dealing with the aspects of the Moorish government that was still functioning, and put them to work. And sometimes they would try to rebel, and so they employed Moors, meaning the free Virginians that was around, to come in with guns and all of that and lock them all down, put them in what were plantations or projects. Understand? This means that all of the history that we have been talking about in terms of slavery, when we just say slavery, we're talking about white people. When we say African slavery, we're talking about Caucasian people, and African people. When we talk about Negro slavery, we're talking about autochthonous American Moors or Moorish Americans of Alamada, Estados, and the old empire. She didn't like that. And the old empire to now. So as we are now in this eclipse stage where their empire was falling, this is why they had to invest so much money through the Thule Society into the Black Sun. Yeah. And through them, they was going to do it, but the Archduke Ferdinand wasn't down with it. He was trying to amalgamate back into the Moorish thing. So they killed him, and then eventually the rest was history. So they tried to make it like the League of Nations was about Rothschild and them, but it was more about what they were going to do in capitulation to them all having to bow to the Sultan, who was now placed in our Quran behind our Prophet and handing over the deed of the mandate to do so. So today, Moors want you to say, oh, well, if that's true, then prove it with a document. The white man been looking for it ever since. That's how all-wise and all-knowing your ancestors are. And we know how to take things into the afterworld through death. But niggas can't get it until we want to rematerialize it to those people that's worthy enough to understand what was left for them. This is chess, nigga, not checkers. If you always looking for a piece of paper that you can verify that another man wrote, then you have another man's penis in your behind all the time. You have to go with what you have collectively understood and comprehended enough to be able to come up with an assessment that you can go within yourself to find out if it's true or not. When I first got the knowledge and I read the first thing, who was the original man? The original man is the Asiatic black man, the maker, owner, ruler of the planet Earth, father, civilization, God of the universe. That resonated with me. That made sense to me. I don't have to. So if the white man wants to put that on a terrorist list and say that because I believe that in that somehow I hate America or hate the United States or hate Caucasian people, he can say all that all he wants. That's not true. I do with what works for me. So if it works for me, it can work for anyone. Therefore, I don't have to lead anyone. I can be myself, and in the process of that, come and commune with people who want to be themselves as well. Because I am so free that I want everybody to be free around. So the white man created something called communism, and now because I say that, that's what that means. I'm a communist? No. I grew up hating commie pinkos. I grew up in the Reagan era. You understand? I grew up under a real America. Where these niggas was flipping drugs, creating crack, and all of that. I come from the generation, the last generation to remember music before hip-hop. Nobody could take that from me. Nobody could tell me what this country was like back then. Nobody. I didn't know what a homosexual was until almost 17 years old. Really? I knew what a sissy was. I knew somebody was. I didn't get into all of that until way later, where I went to, again, high school, right? Where you're bombarded around all these different nationalities and all of that, and all these different things based upon what? Roe versus what? No, not Roe versus Wade. Brown versus Board of Education. The worst thing that ever happened to black people. I got to go to school with this nigga doing meth and shit in the bathroom. I'm from Brooklyn. We don't do meth. Niggas was doing crack. That's what niggas do. So then niggas started selling him crack. But he looked like Jesus, so niggas called him Jesus. I mean, Caesar Borgia Jesus, not Jesus Jesus. But in that, this was the environment. This is a New York public school. And that was tame. When I look back on it now, that shit was tame back then. Niggas was just in stealing clothes, looking good, trying to get girls. Which is what it is now. And at least now they dancing and doing shit that makes them more, like, youthful. But the extreme now is that the niggerism thing has reached its course. That's why you see them now trying to depict themselves as kings and queens. Then what you see them now as a monarchy, because they got to move into the phase where monarchy and titles and things they want to start speaking in. So the only people who could really operate in that true level is you in your true capacity. If a Sikh can come in and have a job, a regular job, and because of his religion not pay taxes, and nobody give him a problem, there's no reason why you can't be in the job with your fez or your turban and doing your job and nobody say nothing. Why is it a problem when the black man or the black woman do it? That's when you are confronted with the exact image of the secret, the royal secret to keep you out of your inheritance. And so you could be whatever you want to be, but in the end, it's what you are that matters. What you are, whether you realize it or not, whether you accept it or not, no matter how much you bleach, no matter how much you dye, no matter how many black men you sleep with, no matter how many white women you sleep with, no matter how many homosexual trips or whatever you want to do, all that's going to do is put you farther away from what you know you should be doing. And that is figuring out who you are and who these people are around you and why they keep using you as a portal for shit that you know you shouldn't be doing. I read this article about Thandie Newton, and she was talking about how they used to make her masturbate in front of them on film and all of that, and then they used to send the tape around as her casting couch tape for them to do, and they would all have sex with her. Like, this is what this black woman do. But in a movie, in every movie she in, her mate or whoever is always a white guy. It's like Zoe Saldana, always a white guy. You can never do a movie with a black guy. When you do a movie with a black guy, he's always like the worst nigga in the world. This is to always make them more detestable. This is a purposeful thing that is agreed upon. A couple of shows ago, I talked about the Congress at Wilhelmsbad and the agreement of which allegedly Illuminism was let into the Scottish Rite system, of which then the articles had to be rewritten. This is where the line of Albert Pike come in, because his grandfather allegedly was there, along with representatives of the American Morris system, Kituwa system, who was backed up by the Duke of Brunswick, who was also John Hanson Bay. So in the verification of these dukes and these Moors and these people trying to settle the beef between the Huguenots and all of the rest of these people, the Hessians, who have now conceded after the Civil War what we're going to do, they agreed to let this risen up aspect of so-called Caucasian Masonry to exist amongst them, and that they would act as big brothers or shepherds of them and allow them to rule while we went through our reorganization. And they would be given the seals and things to be able to rock. This is why John Hanson Bay created the Great Seal, to be a representation of the old Moorish Republic, that it would never be taken away from the earth, that this people should not perish from the face of the earth, that is us, because that's what they knew they were doing. They were burying aspects of our history. So when these white people talk about their great families and stuff, they talk about families that they married into based upon it being slaves, based upon the heads of those families not wanting you to have your inheritance back. It's really that simple. Your nationality was your money. So if you represented the money, but you could be forced to take a different nationality, and they own that nationality, then they could breed you into a system of depending on them as an interface. So the complexion of America began to change after 1782 into the mid-1800s, where you see more white males endowed with powers and papers and letters going over and establishing contacts based upon families over here, to show how they are now moving into modern society and using these white civilized Freemasons who are now accepted into their homes to do business for them. And because they bred so much in with these Caucasian women and all of that, produced these babies, and also trying to breed them together. So by the time you get to families like the Galtons and the other one that interbred with each other, I forgot. They started to inbreed with each other to keep it Khazarian, and it malfunctioned on them. They started to breed insanity into the line of the children, and eventually extincted themselves. So this is the down version of the Yaqub cycle that ended on December 21st, 2012. The cycle that we're in now will be what some people call the reverse Yoruba cycle, or the reverse Yakshmal cycle. Yakshmal being the opposite version of Yaqub, the one who came after the true Redeemer, the one who allegedly erected the Crystal City and allowed the pineal gland to function back into its original orb based upon the regrafting of the original man, based upon the precepts of the genetics that was learned and observed in the Yaqub experiment by his cousin, because he was the son of the Yasin father and the Shayuk woman, who accepted their marriage and fell in love and actually had him. And in that became a product and lived amongst his own people. Therefore, he was not an outcast the way Yaqub was. But again, this is an oral history. So whereas Yaqub said, when I get older, I will make a nation that will rule you, and that will be weak and wicked, and that will come to rule you in your kind. This was a revenge statement based upon him understanding that he was a mad scientist and that he was going to destroy everybody by bringing out this albinism within the actual the actual Asiatic form that was based on the Shayuk influence, because both existed simultaneously. So both were high cultures, you see. That's why you have the Bays and the Els. The Shayuks or the Sheiks were more like the Els. The Ghassanis, the Essenes, right? The mystics were more like the Bays, the Turks. The ones who eventually, some of them fell victim or had aspects of that trait in them and did not master the ability to extricate it from themselves. So based upon the groupings of the people, we're in a cycle now, whether they want to accept it or not, where everything is being broken down into the form of the genetic, let's say, 600-year process, of which you see all of these black babies and all of these black men with all these black women and creating all of these so-called mulatto races. These so-called mulatto races eventually are going to go back into darker people because there won't be enough Caucasian people on the planet for them to remate with. Therefore, whether they like it or not, it's going to create a system of something else. Because if a black man hooks up with let's say a Caucasian woman, that baby, they want to say it's mulatto, right? But essentially that baby is more of a, let's say, dominant black stock. Yet if the black woman has the white man's baby, it's of the same dominant black stock, but it's almost more dominant, being that it's the maternal strain of the archetype, the feminine polarity. Whereas if a black man was to hook up with any other woman on the planet, that baby comes out predominantly black. Yet the consciousness of the original man is what determines the destiny, or what will also determine the destiny of the child, because the nobility, the honor, the wisdom and all of that has to be done. That's a good point, Ben. Selena said, like, when you look at the offspring of Mariah and Nick Cannon, I'm not trying to diss his seed or his baby, but it shows you either that's not his baby or his genetics have been so reached out and washed out that he cannot manifest it. But when you look at the size of the baby's head, remember, Yaqub is a big head scientist. You got twins, right? Moroccan, right? And Monroe. So these M13 signals, this is how they talk. But regards to what they want to do, based upon everything as it is, on the way that it's going, and then based also on things like hip-hop and shit like that, they've created a cycle where they've got only a couple of years to get it right. If the, let's say, brown people, like all these Mexicans that want to kill black people and all that, if they don't really try to go back into the original, meaning try to go with an original woman, right? That's 100% original, meaning of the ancient Asiatic stock. They're going to be gone within 4 generations. Well, excuse me, the albinos. If the albinos don't do it, meaning the white man, if they don't do it, they're going to be gone within a couple of generations. That's why you see more of them adopting more black people than you see them adopting Chinese. A lot of the Jewish people adopt Chinese people because they want to go into the Chinese thing. So if the Chinese people, if that energy don't function right, they're going to be gone within 8 generations. Understand? Then you got the more, let's say, brown people. If they don't do it, they got about 16 generations before they out of here, because they were the last ones that was here who came like right after us. This is the stock that produced the Morisco and everybody else, the people today that we would call Dominican and dark-skinned Honduran and these type of people. You know what I mean? All Asiatic, but the ones that still lived the jungle way of life and all of that, those were the ones that still had that trait that was somewhat grafted out or taken out of them, but they adopted the mystic aspect of what the old culture and society was, which is why they became almost put in like a habitat situation. In some ways, they get more respect than the Native Americans. You know what I'm saying? So, ultimately, so long as there's 144,000 of the original stock, we good. You get what I'm saying? Like, I'm not trying to, like, box nobody out of that or put people in fear or whatever. I'm just saying that this is how you have to look at things when you start to look at things as a government, if you want to understand yourself as that. But being a government doesn't mean that you're against something else. You can't be against the United States because you're in enmity with the United States, meaning that you got treaties that protect you from it moving against you as an enemy combatant, so long as you declare that open. And as one who is endowed by a theocratic aristocracy. I'm put on a mission to do what I'm doing. And in that, I'm not trying to take nothing away from the actual state, because the state has already things in place to protect this application or exercise of my theocratic right, which is a divine right that goes all the way back to time immemorial. That time immemorial being the outcast or the outcrop of what we perceive to be the reality itself. Which has nothing to do with the present one. The present one is just a validation that one existed before it. That's why a lot of people, the people who have the most here sometimes feel the most in prison and broke down. Where sometimes the people that have the less are the most spiritually inclined and free, because they don't have the debt and obligation that it took for them to sell an aspect of their soul to get something that was already theirs, or the responsibility to actually stand up and be what their ancestors know they are, in spite of their own people. It's not the white man so much, it's their own people that don't like when they exert that aspect of themselves that is natural, because they have been brainwashed through the Buloid system to create a avenue by which culture was agreed, as it was the Boule and the Benai Brith, to create a system through the Mossad, to create a system that would actualize a non-cultural identity, to disassociate themselves from any cultural aspect of Judaism or so-called African Pan-Africanism or African Islamicism or any aspect of black culture, which were all facets to take people away from Moorish science. Because Moorish science is a definitive that's written in lexicons of history all over the world. But it's been sprinkled into different aspects, and based upon everybody keeping a secret from you, they all playing dumb. Because it's classified. So on the state level, they're going to act like they don't know, but on the federal level, they do. But federal level can help you if you produce a bill of exchange documents that's not validated, you claiming that you foreign national, but then you still ain't changed and correct your situation at the root. The UCC came out the year after. But it's good that I did it and helped other people do it, because the process that it took us to get to the point to do that took 4 or 5 years. And ain't nothing negative came from it, because then it was all about the person doing what they needed to do to take it to the next level. By no means was we saying that was nationality. That's something different. There's nationality entwined into it, but when you deal with the UCC as a more, you're dealing with it. You got to deal with it. So consequently, what we all should do tonight specifically is understand the aspects of how this relates to us and what we are missing in terms of the last straw. Next week, we're going to get into that of spiritualism that a lot of Moors don't want to deal with, which is the zodiac in correspondence to what people perceive as magic, and how these talismans and these things was used specifically, and how you can imbue your essence on them so that way they work for you. And I don't just mean things that's out there. I mean things that you create for yourself that are amulets of protection to protect you from anybody that isn't you, that are no way embellishment, but are they manifestations of who you're supposed to be. That's why you got to understand, when you look into the abyss, as they say, the abyss looks back. Back, it looks at the aspect of you that is the most open. So, anybody wants to holler at us about the class we got coming this Wednesday, or dealing with any bookings, lectures, anything like that, holler at me at houseofel@hotmail.com, as well as check out the book, Dark Scope for 18, the world's most dangerous comic book novel. Things in it is actually coming true. Word is bond. Check it out. It's at www.darkscope418.com. Thank you for putting up with my rambling. I don't mean to do it, but sometimes it just gets into it. And again, thank you all for the support. Check out www.blackmambaworkouts.com. And thank you guys for coming through. Also check out Team Cordoba. Song you heard in the beginning comes off our album, the soundtrack mixtape album CD. Go to Tune or iTunes at teamcordoba.com, as well as www.aseertheducateers.com. So again, thank you for coming through, and inshallah we'll speak again. Peace. houseofel@hotmail.com. Holler at me about class on Wednesday. Peace.